Is Tony Pollard finally peaking at the right time? All that and more in this episode of the Locked On Cowboys podcast.
You are Locked On Cowboys, your daily Dallas Cowboys podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Locked On Cowboys. Locked On Cowboys.
Welcome back to the Locked On Cowboys podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We'd like to thank you for making us your first listen of the day. This episode is brought to you by PrizePicks, the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL and use promo code LockedOnNFL for a first deposit match up to $100. I am your host, Marcus Mosher. You can follow me on Twitter at Marcus_Mosher. Joining me today, as always, is Landon McCool. You can check him out on Twitter at McCoolBCB. On today's show, we're going to break down some of our notes after watching the All-22 film from the Cowboys win over the Commanders in Week 18. We've got a lot of interesting notes and nuggets, but Landon, I want to start with the running backs in this one. Yeah. And I want to preface all this by saying the defense that Washington had out there was pretty rough. I mean, they were missing several starters. Sure. So I don't want to get too ahead of myself here. However, just based on how they physically looked, I thought Tony Pollard and Rico Dowdle looked really good.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's what we're looking for right now. I mean, success and yardage. I mean, obviously that can be taken, with a grain of salt. But as far as how they're physically moving, I think that all looked very positive as for two guys that, Pollard still kind of working his way back from that multitude of injuries that happened, at the end of last season. And Dowdle, who has had a recent ankle injury that has kind of had him in and out of the lineup a little bit. So it was really good to see them get out there, make plays, not just kind of go through the motion and allow people to kind of get a bunch of yards before contact, seeing them take hits, make plays in the backfield, catching passes. I mean, think about the Pollard catch that he made on that fade route for the first down early in the game. Just the athleticism that's involved in some of the runs that he was doing, where I think there was an outside run where he was corralled by three guys and it was easily going to be a 3 or 4 yard loss. And he kind of slaloms around a couple guys and able to get a 2 yard gain out of it. And I think there was another run that took them down to, what was it? I think the 2 yard line, if I remember correctly, where Pollard's just, getting in and out of guys, running through guys. And again, keeping in mind who they're playing, I understand, that all that, but still the athleticism involved in kind of making those moves it requires a healthier Pollard than what we've seen, especially early in the season. And then Dowdle, I mean, we weren't sure at least I wasn't sure what we were going to get from Dowdle. I mean, he hasn't been playing. He's had this ankle injury. He hasn't, he played a little bit on the ankle injury and just wasn't, quite the athlete that we're used to, right?
He looked healthy,
but I think he looked healthy in that game, and he looked comfy. He had. I thought it was very funny in the game when we were watching it. He had that series where I thought it was the same play that they ran twice, but it wasn't. It wasn't the first time where he dropped the pass the first time, and the second time he caught it and ran 23 yards. It was a slant flat the first time, classic drag in for McCarthyites. And then a stick flat. That was the second one where he gets out of the backfield, catches the ball with so much room around him. And that burst that we were used to, the physicality at the end of the runs, that was all there. And then you add in all the good pass protection stuff we saw from those guys. I think, they ended up accounting for 186 total yards of offense and a touchdown. And they were just relied upon a lot, and they looked comfortable, and that was a really positive thing to see, especially again on that really crappy turf, the really crappy grass that Washington has. So that was really positive to see.
I want to mention a couple PFF things really quickly. And again, I know PFF grades are not the end all be all, but I think it does give you a good idea of where a player's at. So first 10 weeks of the season, Tony Pollard had a PFF grade of 66.4. That was actually kind of below average for the starting running back level in the NFL. Since week 11, 80.4. I think that's the third highest in the NFL during that span. Now, it hasn't been perfect. We're still waiting for him to bust some of these longer runs, but you can tell he's just so much healthier than he was early in the year. And I do feel better about him going into the playoffs, especially now that the Cowboys are playing at home, right? If they were going to play at Tampa Bay or somewhere else, you always worry about those conditions. But I think in Dallas, I expect him to look pretty good against this Green Bay defense on Sunday.
Yeah, I agree. And I think the other thing too is that I honestly feel like is just as important is the healthy Dowdle, because in order to keep Pollard healthy and keep that kind of production, it's you need that alternate guy who you can trust to play positively, so that you can give him the relief that he needs. So having both of them healthy helps each other in a way that is that can't be dismissed.
I'm curious to see how much they use Dowdle in a playoff game. Like what's their level of trust for Dowdle in a big game against the Packers? Does he get 5 touches, or is it just one of these games where they lean so heavily on Tony Pollard to carry the work? I'm curious. One other guy that I want to mention quickly, Hunter Lipke, our other running back. Yeah. I'm just going to let you do it. Why don't you go ahead and tell the people what you saw from Hunter Lipke this week?
Well, first of all, I speaking of PFF grades are not the end all be all of them. I think that he got very royally screwed by PFF. But second of all, I think
he had a 5.2 pass blocking grade.
That was just ridiculous. And frankly, it's especially ridiculous because the thing. Okay, let me back up. Marcus and I or maybe he hasn't, but John and I have been talking about this one specific play where you saw Hunter Lipke and TJ Bass take, I think it was Daron Payne for a ride. And I'm pretty sure that they did one of those on a pass protection situation as well, where and I actually put this in my notes. They did some very kind of interesting pass protection stuff with the backs where they were chipping for the guard. Right, like they isolated the tackles, and then Lipke would line up kind of closer to the line of scrimmage, almost like you would normally, like a fullback. And then TJ Bass would kind of work inside, pushing the guy outside, and then Lipke was on the outside, kind of double teaming him. Then what you ended up getting was both of your guards in pass protection situations working with double teams, which is exactly what you want, right? You don't want to isolate these two youngsters.
It's like duo for pass blocking.
Yeah, it's like duo for pass protection. It was pretty interesting. So and then on top of that, just burying dudes, like getting guys out of the way, like getting holes, finishing guys on the ground.
Yep.
I'm a big Lipke fan. I've said my piece. We will move on, but I'm glad that he's
one more running back thing for the people listening to the podcast. Some quotations. We saw Cavante Turpin in the backfield, something that we've been kind of wanting to see for a while. His one touch in the backfield went for like 7 or 8 yards. I'm not predicting it, but I won't be surprised if we see multiple touches from him this week in the backfield.
Oh, I mean, a big note in my notes was, it's been surprisingly quiet on the Cavante Turpin reception front. I think he has 1 target in the last 3 games, and that's after a lot of success so far, just kind of sprinkling him as a receiver. There was a point during the season when I'm pretty sure that he was leading the team in touchdown receptions, if I'm not mistaken. So I imagine that ends right soon. Like I imagine that they've decided to kind of, okay, let's just put him away over here.
I think we're going to see like an end around this week, or a couple of like touch passes just to try to get Green Bay's defense playing, sideline to sideline. So we're going to see some Cavante Turpin this week. You can bet it.
I thought that came to my mind real quick, and then we can move on. But it's interesting to me how last year the plan a lot was kind of wide receiver 3 by committee, and it was kind of a by necessity, right? Because you didn't have the kind of talent that you wanted at wide receiver.
Wide receiver 3 or wide receiver 2?
Well, I mean, there's that too, right? Yeah, I guess it is ultimately that. But definitely wide receiver 3 was by committee. Now you have a solid wide receiver 1. You have a clear wide receiver 2. And wide receiver 3 is by committee, but that's only because you have all these different guys that you kind of want to get touches to.
Well, and you're just not having to worry about so many touches because you can that wide receiver 3. It's now you're talking about like 6 to 8 touches.
That's right.
Right. Rather than trying to find out who are going to be the other. How are we going to get the other 13, 14 touches figured out? Whenever CeeDee Lamb and Dalton Schultz aren't touching the ball like it was last year. So,
and ultimately what it means is that you can get these guys. You don't have to put these guys in situations that they aren't good at, right? Like you don't have to have Gallup run every single type of route. on his targets, you can just have him run the routes that you feel comfortable with, or
Yes.
you don't have to have Tolbert do the same thing, or Turpin, right? All these guys, like you can get at Brooks. I mean, they've mixed in Brooks here, right? So I think that what they could do is they have, the set amount of, you're going to get Fergie six to 8 targets. You're going to get Cooks 6 to 8 targets. You're going to get CeeDee Lamb 35 to 40 targets in a game. But you're not going to you still got these extra, I don't know, 6, 7 targets to kind of play around with, where if you need to, you can give them very specific looks that, are schemed up stuff, things that can get them open and opportunities to make big plays.
All right, Lane, I want to talk about the guards in this game because, man, they played their butts off on Sunday. Let's get to them next. This episode is brought to you by FanDuel. The NFL regular season is wrapping up and it's over right now, but we've got the NFL playoffs and there's still time to get in on the action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers can get $150 in bonus bets guaranteed with any bet that you place of at least $5. That is $150 in bonus bets, win or lose. The app is so easy to use. There's so many different ways to bet, like live same game parlays. You can find bets in the Explore tab. Plus, you can make a parlay in the Parlay Hub, the best way to find popular parlays and so much more. So visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and make your first bet a layup with FanDuel, the official partner of the NFL. Welcome back to the Locked On Cowboys podcast. We want to let you know that Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows covering every league. Go to Locked On Sports Today on YouTube and subscribe to the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel. Landon, let's talk about the guards in this game because TJ Bass and Brock Hoffman, who we didn't know was going to start until 90 minutes before kickoff.
Yeah.
I thought they were incredible.
Yeah, and I think we should also set the standard here a little bit, because even though these guys are both backup guards coming in, I think you pointed it out, right? Like Brock, TJ Bass got to practice the entire week as the starter with the team, basically, right? Mm-hmm. Brock practiced the whole week as the backup center, and then found out 90 minutes before the game that he is going to be the starter at guard instead of Zach Martin. So
crazy.
This just crazy. So let's setting that stage. I will say that Hoffman survived the game, right? Like he didn't get you killed. He didn't, he was not the part that lost you the game or destroyed a whole bunch of plays. There was definitely a very welcome to the NFL moment on his first snap against Daron Payne, where he got pushed back into Dak's lap. But thank goodness we have Dak Prescott as our quarterback, because he just calmly delivered a strike to Cooks for a first down. But having said that, considering all things, he came into this game not knowing that he was going to be playing at all, playing a position that he doesn't play regularly. I mean, he does, but in snaps, but mostly he's been focused at center. And so considering through that lens, I thought he played really, really well. I think TJ Bass, just on his level, on a guy that is a backup guard who is an undrafted free agent coming in as a starter, I think TJ Bass played fantastic. Seriously, I think TJ Bass has starter offensive line qualities to him, and I think he proved it in this game. I don't know that I'm necessarily advocating for him to be the starter for the Cowboys next year at guard, but I definitely think that in a year of off-season work in the weight room, and he is going to be a starting quality interior offensive lineman. There was just too many times when you saw him understanding what was happening to him in the pass protections, sifting through the twists and stunts. They really did try to kind of get, confuse these guards. He saw it all very well. He was moving well. He got to the second level and was sealing guys off. He was good in the run game. That's the area where I feel like he can improve the most a little bit, just because I think he can get a little stronger, especially if he's going to be playing guard. But I think as far as knowing his assignments, understanding when things change, making adjustments on the fly, technique wise, getting to where he needs with playing within himself, not overextending when he gets to the second level so he can't even make the block on the linebacker. All those things TJ Bass did like he has been a 5 or 6 year vet. It just really was very impressive to see. And just thinking back to the trajectory of where we've seen him come from, a highly thought of undrafted free agent, a guy who kind of showed you a little bit in training camps and then just kept building good days. And now we've arrived at what we saw, what was a very solid game for a undrafted free agent backup rookie guard.
Yeah, so I think he ended up playing 400 snaps or something like that this year, which I mean, it's pretty incredible for an undrafted free agent. Listen, I don't know if he's going to end up being a starter next year because in a perfect world, you would love to have Tyron Smith back and you'd love to have Tyler Smith back. But I got to say, I feel pretty confident that if he's your swing interior guy, I mean, there's a drop off obviously from Tyler Smith and Zach Martin to him, but there's a lot of teams in the league that would love to have Tyler Bass starting for them right now.
Oh my God. I'll throw this out there. Can he snap the football? Because that's something we should find out this offseason. Because, if you don't want to necessarily pay Biotish coming out of this year, he could be a guy that could at least be a stopgap if you decided to draft a center or something like that, right? So just something to consider.
I mean, I don't hate his body for a center. It's just, I mean, there's a lot of responsibilities when it comes to being a center. But I think he deserves the opportunity to get a bigger role next year.
I think so too. And I think he seems like a pretty heady player. I mean, look, being able to kind of, he was a tackle in college and he moved into guard without any problems. Maybe he could just slide in a little bit more and snap the ball and be there. So, I just think he's a guy that's earned opportunities through his hard work and through his solid play. And this I felt like was just a really nice cherry to a fantastic rookie season for TJ Bass.
I do want to give Mike McCarthy some credit here because I mean, just think back to the Jason Garrett days where if you had one offensive line injury, the whole operation would fall apart. But we've seen this year, even in games when Tyron Smith doesn't play, the Cowboys can still score 30 points. The Cowboys literally lost their all-pro guard 90 minutes before the game, and they were without both guards. And you didn't really notice. I mean, obviously those guys didn't play as well as your starting guards, but it didn't impact the operation of the game enough for it to really change anything.
I mean, they had like 135 yards rushing or whatever it was.
One of their best rushing games of the season.
Yeah, I mean, it's, and look, I think you're 100% correct. McCarthy deserves a lot of credit here because if you look at this is something that McCarthy has been able to accomplish through multiple offensive line coaches, right? Yeah. So this isn't just like an offensive line coach who seems to be particularly adept at adjusting protections or whatever. To like this is a schematic thing I think that McCarthy is able to do in order to protect his offense and understands how to change the just make tweaks here and there to better support the backups that you have in the game. So yeah, like again, there's one thing that I don't think that McCarthy gets enough credit for, and that's small adjustments to personnel that make a difference in the schematic changes that have to be made due to injury. The Cowboys have been so much better about dealing with injuries on the offensive line and shuffling guys around and not making it look like, circus music is playing in the background while it's happening. So it's really impressive.
I want to give a shout out to our friends at Locked On Packers. Peter had Bob Sturm on today, and he was actually talking about that same thing. It's in the previous coaching staff, it just felt like a house of cards where they had injuries. For Mike McCarthy, it's like he almost welcomes injuries sometimes during the season because it gives them a chance to build up their depth, and it gives them a chance to find players. And like TJ Bass, was it week 3? TJ Bass got to start for the Cowboys. It didn't go particularly well. There was also a game against the Jets, I think, in week 2 where Zach Martin got injured. He played like 50 snaps in that game. And now at the end of the season, you're better for it. I mean, you feel pretty good that if something were to happen to one of your starting guards in the playoff game now, that TJ Bass can come in and not ruin the operation. So I just wanted to give McCarthy some credit for that. I want to go to the defensive side of the ball. I mean, the Cowboys, for the most part, dominated on defense. But there was one player that kind of stood out to both you and I when we were watching the All-22. We'll get to him next. This episode is brought to you by PrizePicks. PrizePicks is the largest daily fantasy sports platform in North America. It is the easiest and most exciting way to play DFS because it's just you against the numbers. Instead of battling thousands of other players, including pros and sharks, all you have to do is pick more than or less than on 2 to 6 player stat projections and watch the winnings roll in. PrizePicks is the most fun that I've ever had playing DFS because there's just so many different players and stat projections to choose from. Plus, PrizePicks even offers a reboot policy so that your entries stay in play, even if one of your players gets injured. For football and basketball games, if you have a player who exits the game in the first half and does not return in the second, that player is rebooted. PrizePicks is the only daily fantasy sports platform with an injury insurance policy. So go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL and use promo code LockedOnNFL for a first deposit match up to $100. Again, go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL and use promo code LockedOnNFL for a first deposit match up to $100. Welcome back to the Locked On Cowboys podcast. Every dayers. On tomorrow's show, we're going to answer your Twitter questions ahead of the Cowboys wild card matchup against the Green Bay Packers. On Thursday's show, we've got Peter Bukowski and the crossover show, and then Landon, you and I on Friday to get you ready for the NFL playoffs. But before we head out, just really quickly, wanted to mention Dorrance Armstrong because you had a really cool stat on Armstrong that I want you to share.
Yeah, it took me a second to figure this out, and I actually discovered this by being on the wrong page of Pro Football Reference. I discovered that Dorrance Armstrong has finished the last 2 seasons. The last 2 seasons and the last 3 games of the season, he's had a 3-game sack streak going into the playoffs, and it's just. It's really, really impressive that, this is a guy that I think we've even talked about earlier season that is very easily forgotten on this team. You've got Micah Parsons, you've got DeMarcus Lawrence, even Fowler kind of overshadows Armstrong in a lot of ways because of, his previous pedigree and just the kind of timing of stuff. But there is no one that is more of a glue guy on the Cowboys. Like he is this. I think I'll declare this now. Dorrance Armstrong is the glue guy for the Dallas Cowboys, right? He
does all the little things.
He does all the little things. He's had, like 16 and a half sacks or something like that in the last 2 seasons. He's, maybe their best special teams player, including, definitely their best special team, like punt blocker, kick blocker. Mm-hmm. I'm pretty sure was the highest rated special teams player in the league last year.
Yep.
And I think, has had his job kind of reduced a little bit because they wanted him to play more defense this year. But again, another guy that in all of this moving around of DeMarcus Lawrence and Parsons and putting Parsons in the spot where he can, thrive the best, it's Armstrong that makes it work. Right. It's Armstrong that is the guy that, we're putting Parsons here. Then that means that we got to find somebody to fill his spot over there. Okay, let's put Armstrong there. Oh, Parsons is playing on the outside. Well, we need another pass rusher inside, and DeMarcus Lawrence is on the left side. So who are we going to have rushing the 3 technique? Oh, let's throw Armstrong in there. Exactly. Oh, we need a drop end who's going to drop into pass coverage zones because you're doing like a fire zone blitz. Oh, let's put Armstrong over there. He is just the guy that you throw at the problems that you have, and he makes it work, And I wanted to make sure that this guy, especially going into the playoffs, he gets the credit that he deserves because Super Bowl teams have guys like these guys on these teams, and it's not someone that you draft in the first round. It's not someone that you prioritize in free agency. Good NFL teams, they find these guys and they develop them, right? And the Cowboys have one of them that is, I think, able to wear all these different hats and play at a very high level at all of it. And if the Cowboys make a run in the playoffs this year, I have a feeling that a lot of the credit will not go to, but should go to a guy like Dorrance Armstrong.
Yeah, and he's the type of guy that could swing a playoff game because Micah Parsons is going to get a ton of attention. DeMarcus Lawrence is going to move around, and we expect him to have a big game against Green Bay. Can Dorrance Armstrong get a sack and a half against the left tackle in one-on-one situations? Can he make a big run stop? Or in a 3rd and 6, can he get a pass deflection that gets the Cowboys off the field? It's those the type of players that ultimately decide these games. And I feel really good going into this Packers game that maybe it's Armstrong that has that big game. Dante Fowler as a situational pass rusher
Yes.
the last couple of weeks has been really impactful. Somebody like that. The Cowboys have a lot of different names that can help you out, but Armstrong really is one of the forgotten heroes on this defense.
Yeah, and again, just on special teams as well, and the fact that he's been a Cowboy his entire career. I mean, like it feels like he's been with the team for like a decade plus, and he's like, 22 years. He's 26, but it feels like he's 22 years old still.
One more guy, just really quickly. I thought Jordan Lewis again played a really good game. He's going to be another big one because you're going up against a Packers team that loves to play 3 and 4 wide receivers. They have a tight end that is basically a receiver in Luke Musgrave. They like to run it out of, shotgun, out of 3 receiver looks. Jordan Lewis is another one who has made a bunch of big plays in this game. He had the strip on Brian Robinson early in the first quarter, recovered the fumble. He's the guy that, again, it's him and Dorrance Armstrong are 2 guys that could flip the games for the Cowboys in the playoffs.
It wasn't just a strip, too. It was Jordan Lewis filling the B gap and stopping Robinson's momentum in the B gap and then taking the ball. I mean, I have seen a cornerback sun some wide receivers before. I don't know that I've ever seen a cornerback stuff a running back in the B gap and then take the ball from his hands. Like, that's baller move. J. Lou and Wilson both have really, really come on these last 2 weeks. And I was just saying in my notes too, when you have your second and third tier playmakers starting to wake up at the end of the year, man, that means that your defense could be in for something special coming up in these next few weeks.
All right, that is it for today's show. We want to thank you for making Locked On Cowboys your first listen every single day. Go check out the channel on YouTube. We post videos every day over there. Go follow the podcast wherever you get your podcasts. We are free and available on all platforms. Follow Landon on Twitter at McCoolBCB. I'm at Marcus_Mosher, and we will see you right back here tomorrow.